gather up about a third of the boat, and then we'll get moving in a bit. But, well, no, it's a blustery night.
Same thing that any one of us would have thought if we were here. These bars are heat-treated carbon steel. They're bend and tool resistant. It's dang near impossible to cut through them if you don't have enough time. One of the quickest ways to end up in segregation was breaking the no-talking rule, the code of silence. He notices that on those heat-treated carbon steel bend and tool resistant bars that someone has managed to notch the bars. Doc is the son, the last surviving son of Ma Barker, the head of the infamous Barker gang, a Prohibition-era gangster family. His last words were, "I was a fool. Never should have tried it."
Slowly along the line of cells on the right side. Cell number 113. To the next cell. Ahead to the far end of Broadway. You should see a clock on the wall. Find your exercise outside. Getting books and mail all had to be earned. One of their favorite privileges was a recreation yard.
Most pleasant place, I believe, on our...
Guys got so wound up in this bush that they slept.
To behave, ended up in a harsher place. Isolation. You should be facing the photo panel. Look to your left. Directly ahead is an open steel door marked D block.
The guy up there can't get up. Well, it's as hard as this. I'll get him up.
Look across the aisle for cell number 138.
Turn right. Slowly continue. Now walk the area.
Same thing that any one of us would have thought if we were here. This place stinks. I hate this. This is the worst time ever. I need to get out. But here's the thing. These bars, all these bars back here, these are replacement bars. They were upgraded for maximum security to replace the bars they had here initially during the minimum security military prison days. These bars are heat-treated carbon steel. They're bend and tool resistant. It's dang near impossible to cut through them if you don't have enough time and the right tools. You have the time and the tools, it is possible. So Leonard Williams is sitting there behind this window. He's thinking what we just talked about. He hates this place. He wants to get out. And he's also thinking, man, those bars, you can't cut through those. But he's also like, what do I got to lose? I'm literally rotting away here. I'm going to try. So he starts to cut those bars. He finds one of those spatulas that's kind of serrated on the side, you know, for Father's Day when you're barbecuing, so you can cut the steaks while you're cooking there. So he finds a serrated spatula, and he starts to work on the windows. Now, before I get any further, Alcatraz, when it first opened, was a different prison than Alcatraz when it was closing. Alcatraz 1934 was an oppressive lockdown prison. You had nothing here. And when I say nothing, I mean one of the biggest rules, one of the quickest ways to end up in segregation was breaking the no talking rule, the code of silence. You are not allowed to speak in the cell house at all. If you walk out of your cell when they open it up and you say good morning to the inmate next to you, you're both going down under the prison, into the dungeons, into segregation. It's an extremely serious rule. It's meant to keep control. No speaking. You don't get to talk. Now we fast forward to the 1960s. There was a point during the day where inmates could go and check out an instrument and all at the same time can sit in their cells and play an instrument. Everybody's playing a different song. It is nothing but racket and noise for an hour. Do you think maybe those guys that escaped and dug out of the back of their cells with spoons might have, I don't know, used that noise time to drill through the back of their cells? Like I said, it's a different prison. So these fellas are back here, and Leonard Williams is sitting there working away, cutting at that window, and he actually starts to make some headway. As soon as he starts cutting through, there's a little bit of give in the bars until you hit that hard carbon steel. And that's when the hard part comes. But, he's dedicated. He's sitting there every day just kind of slicing away a little bit. And he finally starts to make some progress. He starts to notch the bars. And then he hears something he doesn't expect. Williams, transfer. You're out of here, kid. Are you serious? Okay, that's way easier than what I was going to do. So let's go. So Williams is gone. But that job still needs to be done. An inmate still needs to do that prep. So another inmate takes the job. And so you got Charles Burbank. So Charles Burbank takes over the job. Williams is transferred out to another facility, most likely the one he came from. And Burbank's sitting there, and he not only takes over the job, but he probably starts taking over the mindset. I hate this place. This is the worst place on planet Earth. I can't believe I got stuck here. I got to get out of here. And then he looks up at the bars. And then he notices something. He notices that on those heat-treated carbon steel bend and tool-resistant bars that someone has managed to notch the bars, to cut through a little bit. And now he's got some hope. Now he's like, okay, this is a different ballgame. This is a whole different thing. If he can cut through, then I can cut through. So he goes and finds himself a cutting tool, and he starts cutting. And he starts cutting and cutting. And then he hears something he didn't expect to hear. Burbank, transfer. Seriously? Okay, let's get out of here. Way easier than what I was going to do. And now he's gone. But now that position is empty. And it needs to be filled by another inmate. Now, I'm going to squeeze through us here so I can kind of get in the center here so I can make sure everybody sees this mugshot. So, before I show you this, think hard about, sorry about splashing face. Think hard about what you do and the choices that you make in your life, because you don't know if you're going to end up in prison. And you also don't know if that prison is going to be a big deal. And you also don't know if you're going to do something in that prison that's going to make people care about what you did after you died. And you also don't know that if you do these things, they're going to end up using a mugshot that looks like this. It looks like they had him in a dark room for like 6 hours and then just flipped the lights on real quick and took a mugshot. For the rest of your posthumous existence, this is what you get. So I feel like this is one of the worst punishments here. To his buddy, Daryl Parker, who's up top in the other part of the kitchen. And he calls Daryl Parker, and he says, Daryl, come on down and look what I did. So Daryl Parker heads on down, he takes a look, and he's blown away. You cut through these bars. I know. You ain't supposed to be able to cut through these bars. I know. What are we going to do? We need to get the hell out of here. I know. Let's go. You want to do this? Yeah, let's go. Now, he isn't part of this plan for much more than a few seconds, but J.P. Scott, he's been working on these for a little while. So he's had time to put his own little plan in place, and he ends up taking sleeves from one of his shirts and tearing them off and stuffing them with blown-up surgical gloves that he's managed to get his hands on, kind of like floaties. So he's kind of ready to go. He's got a little flotation device, but Parker didn't have anything. So those two men, they use their body weight with a 2x4. They pop the window off. They get out. They get to the west side of the island. They shimmy down a sewer pipe, but Daryl slips down the cliff. He breaks his ankle. You've been part of this for 10 minutes, man. You're already a liability. Now, Scott's already committed. He's not going to stick around. Sorry, man. I gotta be out. I gotta go. Now, Parker makes it to little Alcatraz, that little outcropping of rocks that you saw when you went around the island. And that's about as far as he got, where he realized that, yeah, I'm not going to make this swim in the cold and with a broken ankle. And that's where they found him basically standing there waving his arms to come and get me. And once they collect him, they ask, where's your buddy? Where's Scott? I don't know. Scott got in the water and that was it. Now, Scott, his idea was, I'm going to get on the water on the west side of the island and I'm just going to head that way. On a full outgoing current, this bay moves more water in one tidal flush than the Mississippi moves in an entire week. It moves at about 6 to 7 knots. Michael Phelps tops out at 2. You cannot swim against the full outgoing current. It's impossible. Unfortunately, most of these guys, the 14 different escape attempts, every single time they managed to get into the water when it was at its coldest, its foggiest, and most dangerous. Because they didn't hand out tide tables, so these guys didn't know what they were getting into. But Scott gets in the water, he's got his floaties, he's feeling confident, but he broke his ankle. I don't care, we're out of here. He starts heading that way. But what he starts to realize is that way is starting to pass by. And each landmark he chooses is passing by further and further. He wants San Francisco, not going to happen. He wants Aquatic Park, not going to happen. He wants the Presidio, Fort Mason, nope. Now while he's trying to swim, he's also succumbing to hypothermia. And now he can't reach his arms out anymore. He also can't cup his hands because his fingers are spreading apart. He can't physically move his hands to cup to move the water. And his arms and legs are pulling in towards his body because as you lose heat, your body wants to pull all your extremities in towards you to keep your core warm and alive. And now he can't swim, he can't move his arms, and he's simply just a little floaty buoy in the water as he's watching all these landmarks pass by. He finally hits the rocks at the base of the Golden Gate Bridge before almost being swept out to the open sea. He is unconscious. He is naked because the current has ripped the clothes off of his body. And 2 boys that are down over by the rocks spot him flopping around in the surf. Now, lucky for him, he left Alcatraz and landed at an army base. So there was plenty of people there to help him. Those 2 boys, probably children of military, probably shouldn't have been down at Fort Point that late at night. But they spotted him anyway. They told the military police. Military police grab him up, take him to the infirmary. Now they kind of hear about what's going on. He's got no identifying marks. He's got no, he doesn't have any inmate numbers or uniform stuff that they can identify him with. But Alcatraz has put the call out that they got inmates missing. They kind of put 2 and 2 together. Presidio calls Alcatraz and says, hey, I think we got your guy out here. Now imagine this. You're J.P. Scott. You are unconscious. When you lose your consciousness, you're in the water, and you're thinking, this is it for me. And then you wake up, and you're in a little warm bed in the infirmary, in a place that you don't recognize. And you're like, I made it. And then all of a sudden, correctional officer leans over your bed and says, hi, Scott. Good thing we found you, buddy. So we're going to take you on back home so you can recover in the infirmary back on Alcatraz. Apparently, he's one of the only men who successfully made the trip from here to there. Didn't swim, he just got lucky. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to start moving down the hill, and I'm going to meet you folks right down here in front of this big old water tower for our next escape. Doc Barker, this is Doc. Now, Doc is the son, the last surviving son of Ma Barker, the head of the infamous Barker gang, a prohibition-era gangster family. Now, Doc and 4 of his escape mates, we'll call them, managed to get out of the cell house, and they get all the way down the water. Unfortunately, Doc is shot and killed during his attempt. He's shot through the head, but does not die immediately. They bring him up to the infirmary, where he finally expires shortly after, and his last words were, I was a fool. I never should have tried it. Doc passes away. Now, before we get a little further in the story, kind of lay a little groundwork for the setting here. So Alcatraz, when it's a minimum security military prison, there's a lot more buildings. There's a whole lot more stuff going on out here. This whole area over here used to have a 2 or 3 story wraparound balcony military hospital. Big old huge building here. That whole road that leads up there where that light post is was full of Victorian era homes for families of military staff, higher ranking. And same here behind me, there will be big Victorian homes for staff and their family on the island. But once it transitions from minimum security facility to a maximum security federal penitentiary, the warden does not want families literally living in the shadow of this prison. Now, the story we're talking about tonight actually happens right here where we're standing, and just behind us in this little, little vegetation area here where the tree is, there used to be a cottage. And in that cottage lived a little girl named Joyce, her mother, and her father, who was a correctional officer. Now, before they made the decision to move all the housing out there to the parade ground, up until the end of the 1930s, families from the correctional officers still were living in these places. Now, Doc and his buddies, they get out, and Dad is out there looking for him with the rest of the correctional staff. During an escape, if you're not on staff or if you're not on shift for that night, doesn't matter. It's all hands on deck when there's an escape. So everyone is basically in their homes, wives and kids, worried about their husbands who are out looking for these inmates. And once it's all over, Doc's killed. The last 4 are placed back in segregation and solitary confinement for their escape attempt. And then Dad comes home. He walks in the house. He takes his hat off, kisses his wife. He says, "It's all over. You've got them all." Fortunately, Doc was killed, and we placed him over there in the morgue. That's this Taco Bell looking building back there. It's called Spanish architecture. Please don't comment anywhere online that you heard a historian call it a Taco Bell building. And so Joyce, little girl, his daughter, she's in her room. She's got the door cracked. She's supposed to be asleep, but how are you going to sleep when all this excitement's going on? She cracks the door, she peeks out, she sees Dad kiss Mom and say Doc Barker's right across the road there in the morgue. He's laying on the slab right there, and he's shackled from his ankles to his waist to his wrists, even though he's dead, because zombies. And so he's all shackled up there. But Joyce, she hears her dad say that key thing: "There's a dead body right across the road." Her window literally faces this big wall right here. It's like 15, 20 feet. I'm pretty sure that the premise of that movie Stand By Me was you want to see a dead body. Everybody, when they're kids, is interested in gross, weird stuff, and dead bodies are no exception. So Joyce gets this idea in her head. She closes the door, goes back like I'm still in bed, and she climbs out the window. And she walks across the road, and she climbs over on the left side of that building, and there's a little window, and Joyce gets up on her tiptoes and she looks inside and lets out the biggest scream that you have ever heard. Now think about this setting. The island has just started to just come down from the anxiety of an escape attempt with 5 inmates, and now piercing the quiet in the middle of the night is the scream of a little girl right next to the cell house. Now Mom hears this, obviously, and goes running into Joyce's room. Joyce isn't there. I imagine if I close my eyes and I picture this, like the sashes are blowing in the wind, the window's open, but there's no Joyce. Mom runs to the window, she looks out, she sees Joyce literally standing underneath that light post, and she looks up the road and sees the guard coming down to investigate that scream with his .30-06 rifle. She sees this guard armed, and she's worried for her daughter. She puts her hands up and screams, throws her hands up and says, "Don't shoot! Don't shoot, it's Joyce!" Mom runs outside, grabs Joyce up, brings her back in the house. Now those of us that are parents, you know what comes next? The tongue lashing. Are you out of your mind? What are you doing out? We live in a prison. You go run out the window? Now, after Mom is done dressing Joyce down, she's curious. She wants to know what triggered that scream. So she asks her, "What did you see out there? How come you went out there and screamed?" 85-year-old Joyce is standing right there underneath that light post when she's telling the story and recounting what she saw that night to a group just like you. She said, "I climbed out of that window, and I walked across the road. I got up on my tippy toes on the left side of that building. I looked down, and I seen Doc laying there, and he wasn't wearing nothing." She was not scared of seeing a dead body. This poor child just seen her first naked man. And depending on your perspective, these two things are equally as terrifying. Let's keep heading down the road. Check. All right. I've accumulated more of you since I started. See how it starts? It's just a couple, and then everyone's a zombie. That's kind of how I've been treating COVID, because I haven't gotten sick yet, and I'm kind of looking at it like it's the zombies. Like everyone who's got COVID is a zombie, and I just don't need to get bit. So that's my game I play. So far, I haven't turned into a zombie yet. Okay, last escape attempt. This one is Number 9 from July of 1945. This is John Giles. John Giles was considered a loner and an oddball by the inmates in the cell house, but by correctional staff, he was well liked because in a prison that is basically showcasing inmates who have behavioral issues from other facilities, John was an under-the-radar inmate. He did everything that was asked of him without question. He did not cause any troubles. He did not give any grief to guards. And like I said, in a prison where most of these correctional officers feel like they need to worry about the inmate population, John was not one of them. And because of his good behavior, he had access to jobs that were low security. His job was as a janitor down on the dock, literally right next to the water. Now, it doesn't really make a difference that he's right next to the water because, I mean, let's face it, on an outgoing current, you could literally march every inmate down and say, I dare you, and you probably would get them all back. But John's down there on the dock, and he has this job that puts him in an important position. He gets to see a major security flaw every single day. He gets to see that island over there, Angel Island, which is a state facility, and it's also considered the Ellis Island of the West Coast. It was an army base. So if your family immigrated to the United States and came through the east, you got that beautiful New York City skyline with the majestic Statue of Liberty. But if they came through the west, well, you got that. I mean, you're still here, it counts. So John's watching for 10 years straight that he has this job. He's watching army boats do the same exact thing every single day. Leaves the island, drops a bunch of laundry off here, continues on to San Francisco, drops off soldiers for leave. Alcatraz took over a job that the military started, which was doing their own laundry. When this was a military prison, by the time they abandoned the prison and handed it over to the Federal Bureau of Prisons, by 1933, the U.S. Army had accumulated the job of doing more than 1 million pounds of its own laundry annually. This is a huge job if you pay someone else to do it, and they don't want to pay someone else to do it. So as they're leaving, they basically asked J. Edgar Hoover, hey, when you guys are taking over this prison and making it a maximum security pen, would you mind taking over the laundry job? Hoover's thinking, you know what? It's boring, it's tedious, and you can't take it with you as a career. When you leave, we'll take it. And so Alcatraz continues to do the laundry for the military, and that's exactly the laundry that's coming over here. Army issue military clothing, fatigues, dress uniforms, you name it. And it's coming in bundles by the hundreds of pounds. And what they do is they bring it up on the dock, they sort it out, go looking for any contraband, they put it back in the bags, and they take it to the new industries building to be cleaned. And John's helped out on a few of these details, and for 10 years, he is slowly and meticulously pulling pieces of the uniforms out and stowing them away in a bag he's got hidden under the docks. And over a 10-year period, he manages to put together a complete technical sergeant's uniform. Now, not only does he have the complete uniform, but what happens when we do our own laundry? We leave things in the pockets, right? Sometimes if it's your kids, you find, gross things like, slime things, and boogers and dirt and rocks and whatever. But with with military personnel, you're going to find things like dog tags. You're going to find things like identification. You're going to find things like pre-signed leave slips authorizing you to be certain places, signed by a commanding officer like a blank check. All you need is to put in where you're going. John has all these things. He's got dog tags. He's got everything he needs. And when the day comes, he thinks, this is my opportunity. He jumps down below the dock when no one's looking. He sheds that prison uniform. He puts on his tech sergeant uniform, and he walks onto the boat. Walks down into the hold, goes into a bathroom, locks the door, and waits. And then the boat starts to pull away. And can you imagine that moment? He's like, oh my God, I can't believe this is working. I can't believe I'm getting out of here. But then he notices something. The boat's not feeling quite right. It's not heading in the direction that it should be. Because the one day that John decided was the day he was going to escape is the one day in 10 years that the boat changed its route. And instead of going to San Francisco where John can hop off the boat and just disappear in the crowds, this boat's turning around and heading back to the army base because it's going to collect more soldiers to take them to the Pacific theater of World War II. He does not want to go to Europe and fight in World War II. That was not part of the plan. Now, as the boat's heading towards Angel Island, he's panicking, and there's another soldier on board who is, by his uniform, would signify that he's of a lower rank if John's position were real. And when this person comes up and he says, "Hey, Sarge, you on the right boat?" John shies away from him. If you've ever served in the military, you will know that it is a fact that a person who outranks you will never cower away from you. They have earned that rank and they will exploit it every time they can because you're a subordinate. They will never let that happen. John behaves strangely. His uniform isn't pressed right. He's sticking out. This soldier goes back up to the top, tells the captain, "I think we got a stowaway." At the same time, Alcatraz realize they're one short on the dock. They start doing the count and the sirens go off. And they start looking for Giles. Pretty quickly, they put it together, who he is, where he's missing from. Alcatraz correctional staff hop on the launch boat, and they beat the army boat back to Angel Island. So when John steps off the army boat, the only thing waiting for him is Captain Phil Burgeon, captain of the Alcatraz correctional staff. He says, "Giles, it's over." Giles sits there and just pouts, saying, "I thought this damn tub was going to San Francisco." Phil Burgeon said, "I felt terrible for the guy, the amount of effort he put into that uniform. I mean, it looked good." Unfortunately for John, he wasn't keeping stock of the fact that for the 10 years he was being good, he earned 7 years off of his sentence, all of which he earned back, plus 3 years of solitary confinement. But don't feel bad, because he didn't walk away with nothing. When John came back to the cell house and the inmates heard what happened, they gave him a cool new nickname. They called him Wrong Way Giles. Folks, I hope your escape goes better than John's does. And to make that escape, head straight down this road. Thank you for hanging out with us.
If you like content like this, do me a favor. Like, comment, subscribe. If you don't, unlike. That's fine. I'll be alright with that. It's better than nothing. Alright, until next time. Peace.